Hi everybody, it's Christina. Welcome back to Adventures in Polish Land. Today I wanted to discuss with you the book House Made of Dawn by N. Scott Momaday. I read this as part of the American Lit Reading Challenge for a book set in New Mexico, and while I have been doing standalone book reviews for this challenge, I don't think I can adequately review this book because it was honestly a very challenging read. So I thought what I would do instead is go through the book a little bit, share with you some passages that I found really thought-provoking and eye-opening because I did learn a lot along the way. And I will start off with what I think is the overall summary of the book. This novel primarily focuses on a character named Abel. He is a Native American man who is only part Native American. He doesn't know who his father is, but he starts the book in New Mexico as he returns from war, and the story follows him along the way as he gets put in jail for a crime he commits and then gets relocated to Los Angeles before finishing the story back in New Mexico. So the writing itself was a little bit challenging for me. At the beginning, it was very staccato, very detailed, and it was very nature-based. So it was describing the setting in absolute detail, which was cool in one hand because I could certainly visualize the book, but on the other hand, I found it very challenging to get into. It wasn't keeping my attention. I was having a difficult time discerning who our characters were and their backstory. And for example, there was a man who was a priest at the beginning, but I wasn't really sure how he fit into the community, how he knew Abel, and who he was essentially. So that was a bit of a struggle for me. As the book continues, it is written in different parts, and each part is written a little bit differently. I would say the easiest part for me to read was the one written in the first-person perspective later on in the novel, and it helped to explain a lot of Abel's story, which I really appreciated. And in the end, I ended up giving this book a 3-star rating because I did learn a lot, and I can see why this book won the Pulitzer Prize. But it's something that I think I would need to study in school with people who had more knowledge about the story than I do on my own, and I didn't glean everything from it that I think one could. With that being said, I took some notes on Post-its and stuck them throughout the book, so I thought we could discuss them together because even though I can't really give a full adequate review, I can certainly share my thoughts with you. So the first post-it that I have in the book talks about oral tradition versus the written word, and this was a really interesting point in the book. In the section called The Priest of the Sun, we have this character who is talking about how in Native American history, the history is passed down through oral tradition, versus in Western culture, specifically Christianity, we have the written word, the Bible. And the book discusses how because the Bible is written down, it is therefore given more importance than the oral tradition because it can be seen as the true word or something that is more legitimate than the oral history. I found that really interesting to think about because I think it's true. A lot of times people who are Christian will say it's in the Bible, it's in the Bible, that's how I know it's true. But how do you know that that's true when we have all of these other histories as well? And just because something was written down does not mean it is more important than something that has been spoken and retold for generations and centuries. So I think it's really important for all of us to remember that just because we have different methods of storytelling in our culture, it does not mean that one is more important or more legitimate than the other. Another point that I thought was really important in this book is about how people will make choices about you based on how you look. So I wrote down how people make choices about you and who you are before they even know you, just based on race or ethnicity. In this novel, obviously, we are following Native American people, and they talk about how when they went to work at a factory with other people, most of them were white and they were the only Native Americans, they were automatically treated different just based on how they looked. This is something that obviously happens every day to this day for many different people, and I think it's really unfortunate, especially reading it in this novel, because you can truly see how these characters, these people, were not given a chance. people already made up in their mind who they were, their intelligence level, what they believed, so on and so forth, and they never got to know them. They just wrote them off to begin with. And I think that's a really good reminder that you shouldn't make judgments about people just based on how they look, especially if they have a certain ethnicity, because you don't know who they truly are. You're only seeing their exterior. And while it is so obvious when I say that out loud, I think so many of us have an implicit bias that we need to work to overcome. And I think this novel pointing it out really brought it to the forefront of my mind. And to go along with that, in that same section of the novel, they talked about the word chief and how their colleagues at work would call them chief as a slur. And I could not get over that because I never thought about it like that before. I don't think it is uncommon for people to use that word when talking about people who are their buddies. Like they'll say, hey, chief, something like that. And then even we have fire chiefs. And I kept thinking, does this all go back to appropriation of Native American culture? I had never thought about it like that before, and I couldn't believe it because in this novel, when you hear that word being used as a derogatory term, it makes you think of all the other ways it's used in a genuine manner, and then you wonder if it goes back to Native Americans and whether we're using their language in a way that we shouldn't be. So those are just some of the points that I learned from Housemaid of Dawn by N. Scott Momaday. It was a tough reading experience for me, and it's something that I had to read more about it afterwards to make sure I understood the story, but that's okay. I got through it. I learned some new things. I experienced a culture that I don't usually read about in literature, which is great, and that's part of the reason why I am doing this challenge to begin with. And if you have other books by Native Americans or about Native Americans that you would recommend, please let me know in the comments. I would love to hear your thoughts. I would recommend this novel. It is a Pulitzer Prize winning book. I would say, though, go in knowing it might be a challenge for you. Maybe you read it with a friend so you can discuss it and try to figure out what's on the page together. That's all I have for today. If you want to learn more about the other books that I am reading for this challenge, I will leave my playlist linked in the description box below, and I will see you in my next video. Bye.